Greetings. We're going to talk about the simulation in this little video clip. Most importantly, we're going to talk about how to set up goals. Um, the goal setting process is an important part of any business practice, but specifically, I want you to be practicing how to set HR goals, how to decide what strategies you're going to use to achieve those HR goals, and then ultimately how you're going to assess whether or not you were successful in achieving the goals that you set up. So the first thing I want to start with is a large number of the different kinds of variables of interest in the simulation. The simulation assesses things, as you can see here: absenteeism, turnover, morale, grievance rates, meaning complaints about company policies, accident rate, productivity, quality, and diversity, i.e. the female and minority percentages in the company. So the simulation has a number of starting values in terms of factors that we need to affect. For example, absenteeism is at 498 per quarter, the number of absent days for employees. It ranges in the simulation anywhere from 130 to 510, and your goal is to get it to decrease from 498 as close to as 130 as possible. We don't want zero absenteeism because people are going to get sick, and so we want them to stay home. People need to take vacation time, so again, they're going to be absent because of vacation time. This is also a legitimate reason to be absent, but it's very important that we make sure we set up appropriate goals around absenteeism. So getting your absenteeism to decrease is important. So when you set up your goal statement, if you decide that decreasing absenteeism is an important goal to you, then you will set up, you want to decrease it by 10% or 20% or 30%, in the year. So you give yourself a specific and measurable goal in which to try to achieve. Your turnover rate over here, the starting value is 9.8% of the employees leave. It could be as high as 60%, but as low as 1. 9.8 is pretty high, and certainly if you hit 60%, you're way out of whack. You want to decrease your turnover rate. It will never be zero because we want people to turn over. We definitely want to lose people who are poor performers. But, obviously we don't want it to go up to 60 either. So getting it down from 9.8%, getting it closer to 4 or 3 would be ideal. So our goal here is to decrease turnover. Morale is sort of moderate, right? Morale it's on the low side, but it's sort of that mid-range. People are kind of indifferent. It could go down. Ideally, you want it to go up. The highest it will probably go is at about 90. Nobody is perfect, and no company is perfect in terms of their ability to achieve perfect morale, but you want to see this number increase as best as you can. So again, if morale is important or company satisfaction is important, morale is a good index of whether or not people are satisfied. So you want to set a target for that morale to go up. In terms of grievances, we started about 31, which is still pretty high. The company currently does not have a grievance plan. The assumption is if we have a grievance program, these grievances are being addressed and we should see the grievances go down eventually. A lot of times when you implement a grievance program, grievances go up for a while because people are now utilizing the grievance program, and then the simulation assumes that if there's a grievance program and people are grieving, that those grievances are being addressed. And so ultimately you'll start to see the grievance rate go down. So in the long run, you do want to see your grievance rate decrease. It might go up a little bit at first, but ultimately you want to bring it down. There's always going to be a low level of grievance, a low level of complaints. People need to feel free to be able to make a statement when things are not going right, so they need to feel safe that they can make those complaints. But that's the goal. Is it's going to, you might see this go up. Even if your goal is to see it go down, you might see it go up for a little bit, but ultimately it should start going down. So that's another great goal there. Another goal might be to set your accident rate, to have a safe workplace. And so setting a safe workplace would be to see this accident rate go down. And notice, I mean, it would logically follow that if accident rate goes down, we should see absenteeism decrease as well. Because when people have accidents, they're more likely to be absent from work. So we will see a correlation between absenteeism and accident rate. And again, accident rate starts out fairly high. It can go higher, but we'd like to see it lower. We want to see it approach, this number here, 75. It'll never go down to 0 because accidents do happen, but we want to make sure we decrease it as much as possible. In terms of productivity, again, our goal is to improve productivity. Our employees start at 200, which means each person can make 200 units a quarter. You might see the numbers go down a bit because people aren't getting trained, or we have too many employees, and so the productivity rate might actually decrease because we have too many employees and therefore not everybody's working to the maximum potential. But ideally, we'd like to see this number start to increase. So with enough money in training and attention to things like safety training and quality training, we should be able to see our productivity rates go up pretty high for our employees. So you can set an appropriate goal on that. In terms of quality, again, like morale, you start at about the mid-range at about 50. In terms of the simulation, you may only fall a little bit down to 45. It'll never go down to awful quality, but it also doesn't approach perfect quality. We'd like it to, but of course we know that doesn't happen. Our goal is to invest in quality programs and an amount of money necessary to make sure that we've got good quality products, which means also we have good quality employees. So our quality rate is a reflection of good training for our employees and good quality. So again, we want to see that quality increase as best as we can. The last variable of interest for us would be diversity, and this has to do with the percentage of female minorities we have in the company. Currently there are 13% female, 8% minority. This doesn't even come close to representing what we see in the labor market and in the working population, so both of these numbers need to increase. So our goal is obviously not to hit 100% because that wouldn't be fair. That would be considered a form of discrimination against white majorities. So our goal is to try to get the percentage up there as high as we can. So try first of all with increasing your target percentages when you're hiring to be a little bit more aggressive, so that you could ideally see these numbers come up to like 20, 25, 30% in this area. So our goal here is to increase this. Moving on to this slide here, and you do have these slides available to you in your simulation paperwork on the Blackboard. The factors affecting performance. Now, we talked about each of these individual goals. What can affect these different variables? Hiring appropriately and good staffing will decrease absenteeism. Paying people good wages will decrease absenteeism. Good training will affect absenteeism, and all kinds of programs like employee participation and orientation programs and performance appraisal will also have an impact on absenteeism. And so if one of your goals is absenteeism, these are the typical strategies that you might use here to have an impact on absenteeism. And the same thing here with turnover. If you want to decrease turnover, you want to retain your employees, you want to focus on things like participation programs and grievance programs and orientation programs, so that people are less likely to leave because they feel like they know how to do their job, they've got the information they need to be successful, they know that their concerns are being addressed, they're getting paid fair wages and benefits, and they're getting the training they need to be able to do their job. In terms of morale, same sort of thing. Hiring the right amount of people, making sure they're not doing overtime is really important, paying them good wages, helping to train them, and making sure we've got good systems in place with these different kinds of programs is really helpful. So I'm not going to talk you through each one of these, but you can see grievance has a set of programs that are going to have an impact. Accident rate Also has a set of programs that are going to have an impact, and particularly safety training is going to be big here for accidents. Productivity, all of these things have an impact on productivity. Total quality management, again, the training dollars has to be in the TQM, in the quality area, and then obviously affirmative action and target hiring for female and minorities is going to have your best impact on the diversity of your company. When we set goals, it's a three-part process. And so we'll start here. All right. I don't need you to worry about describing your situation.
Even though the form in this video says that you have 3 years of decisions to make and goals to set for those 3 years, you actually will only be making 2 years of decisions. I have the appropriate form uploaded in Blackboard. Just ignore the image in this video, but follow all the guidelines on how to set the goal, how to determine the programs, and then how to set your metrics for making your goal statements.
So what you're going to do is decide, I want to improve company quality, I want to increase diversity, and I want to improve morale. So what are you going to do to affect that? So let's say we said the first thing we wanted to do is improve quality. So in order to improve quality, we need to make sure we invest money in a quality training program. We want to make sure that we're hiring the right amount of people and doing good staffing. We also want to make sure we have things like a participation program and a grievance program and a performance appraisal program in place in order to have an impact on quality. Right? We want people to get feedback. We need them to know what they're doing right, what they're doing incorrectly, so that they can get the feedback and make the changes that they need. Our next goal would be diversity. And so we can say we're going to set higher targets for hiring every quarter, and we're also going to implement an affirmative action program, as you can see here. Our last goal was to improve morale. So morale can be done by a whole host of different programs, so you can pick and choose the kinds of programs that you want to use to have an impact on morale here. Lastly, we want to think about metrics, right? Metrics are the way that we assess whether or not we're successful. So how do we know that we are successful in terms of our quality management? You know, that we've done, we've met our quality goal. Well, the first thing that we would do is look at the quality index. And if the quality index goes up, that's a good indicator that we've met our goal. Right? When we set our goal, we want to set it as we want to increase 10% or 20% or 30%, whatever that is. And then we look at the index at the end of the intervention, at the end of the fiscal year, to say, were we successful? Did we accomplish what we set out to accomplish in this fiscal year by improving our quality? So you would measure your quality index and you would look at and track it over the fiscal year to see if it actually increased the way you wanted it to. Other things that affect quality are things like grievance programs and performance appraisals. And so you can also track whether or not your grievances decreased. Because if grievances, if you implemented a grievance program and then your grievances decreased, that tells you that people are listening, people are making changes, and people are adapting. And so the expectation is we would start to see the grievances would decrease over time. In terms of the diversity goal, you know, it's a little bit more complex. You can't just say, oh, the percentage of women went up or the percentage of minorities went up. You want to track that over time, and you can track it in the whole aggregate numbers of the company. If you decide to track it via the different levels of the company, level 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, do not put one giant graph with all of those levels in there because it gets too busy to read. We want graphs to be simple and clean and easy to read, so you might want to say level 5 women, how much has increased over time. Level 4 minorities, how much it increased over time. So, and you can also do an aggregate number. The aggregate number of females increased over time. The aggregate number of minorities increased over time. So it's really important that you are very detailed in the way that you deliver that information. The best way that we can assess, whether or not we were successful is looking at the percentage of women and minorities, looking at the number of grievances. If the grievances are high and our diversity is low, that tells us that we've got some problems. If we have a high turnover rate, that may also be an indication that we've got some problems, right? So diversity, we would look at the percentage of women and minorities. The last thing in terms of morale, there's a lot of factors that indicate morale is low. Absenteeism would be high, turnover would be high, morale index would be low. So you want to, if you're saying my goal was to improve morale, looking at the morale index is great, but there are other indices that you can look at. You can look at your turnover rate and say the turnover rate went down, which means employees are staying with the company, which means they're happy. So that shows that morale is probably improving. Same thing with absenteeism. There is a certain percentage of absenteeism that occurs because people are unhappy with the company. So if morale is going up, we should see absenteeism go down. And so if you look back here on this HR plan, which is just a sample plan that you guys can use, it's just a worksheet for you to use. You don't have to hand this in. This is just for you to work through. The third part, as it says here, is the metrics is to establish how you successfully achieved your goals. If your goal was to improve morale, the metrics you would use would be the morale index, absenteeism rate, and turnover rate, just as I just said. So these are really important that you indicate not just your goal, not just how you're going to achieve that goal, but also how you're going to assess whether or not you were successful. So it's a three-part process. If you go into your documents, drafts of things in your goal, in the simulation folder in the Blackboard, you will see a sample goal statement. So it gives you an idea of what I'm looking for in terms of how you're going to, the verbiage and the way I want the goal statement to look. This is my goal. I'm going to do this in 3 years, increase it by this percentage. And these are the strategies that I'm going to use to get there. And then lastly, these are the metrics that are important for me to use in order to assess whether or not I was successful. So your goal statement should have 3 goals. It should have strategies to achieve each goal, and it should have metrics to assess each goal. So it should be broken down into 3 parts. All right. So if you don't have any more questions about that, I'm going to let you guys start practicing your goal statements in the simulation.